It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when I decided to stop by my neighbor's house. I had known Mrs. Thompson for as long as I could remember. Her first name was Laura, but growing up, I always called her Mrs. Thompson out of habit and respect. She lived right next door with her small terrier named Duke, and after her divorce 5 years ago, she'd been living alone. Laura was in her early 40s, but she had the sort of calm, self-assured energy that made her feel timeless. She always carried herself with grace, and everyone in the neighborhood admired how she managed her garden, her house, and her life with such quiet confidence. I was 23 at the time, recently graduated from college and temporarily back at home with my parents while I figured out the next steps in my life. They were out of town that weekend, and I was looking for ways to pass the time. I had promised Laura earlier in the week that I'd come help her with the new shelves she bought online. So, after lunch, I walked over, knocked on the door, and waited. She opened the door with a warm smile, wearing a simple white tee and jeans. Her auburn hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and she looked like she had just been doing something around the house. "Hey, Tyler." "Right on time," she said with that familiar smile. "Come on in." I stepped inside. Her home smelled faintly of vanilla candles, and there was light jazz playing on the speakers. Duke ran up to me, wagging his tail furiously before turning in circles. "Hey, buddy," I said, giving him a few scratches behind the ear. Laura led me into the living room where a flat box lay unopened on the floor. "I was going to start this myself but figured I'd wait for the expert," she said teasingly. I laughed and got to work unpacking the parts and scanning through the instructions. She knelt beside me, helping organize the screws and tools. We chatted casually while I put the shelves together about my job search, her work as an interior designer, and the latest gossip from the neighborhood. A couple of hours passed, and the shelf stood completed against the wall. "Perfect," she said, admiring it. "You did that way faster than I would have." "Thank you, Tyler." "No problem," I said, brushing some sawdust off my jeans. "Anything else you need help with while I'm here?" She looked at me thoughtfully for a second before glancing at the clock. "Actually, I just brewed some coffee. You want a cup?" "Sure," I replied. I followed her into the kitchen and took a seat at the island while she poured us both some coffee. She set the mug in front of me and leaned against the counter, sipping hers slowly. "You know, it's funny," she said after a moment. "You've grown up so much. I remember when you were this shy little kid who'd come over with your mom to borrow sugar." I laughed. "And I remember Duke chasing me up the front steps every time I came over. He still would if I didn't train him better," she smiled. "But really, it's nice having you around again." I nodded. "It's nice being back, even if it's temporary." We fell into a comfortable silence. The sun had started dipping lower in the sky, casting a warm amber glow through the kitchen window. I hadn't realized how late it had gotten. "I should probably get going," I said, setting my empty mug down. She glanced outside, then looked back at me. "You don't have to rush," she said quietly. "You can stay, if you want to." There was something in her tone, gentle, inviting, but layered with a weight I couldn't quite place. I hesitated. "You sure?" Laura gave a small nod and walked toward the living room, her voice floating over her shoulder. "I was going to make something light for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and maybe a salad. It'd be nice to have someone to share it with." The invitation felt sincere, not forced or loaded. I followed her and helped carry dishes from the cabinet as we started prepping dinner. We moved in easy rhythm around each other. She chopped vegetables while I boiled water and grated cheese. There was laughter, playful teasing, and something calm about the way we filled the space together. By the time we sat down to eat, the sun had nearly set. Laura lit a couple of candles and dimmed the lights. It felt cozy, like we had created our own little world in the moment. Over dinner, she shared stories from her past design projects, including one where she accidentally painted a client's entire living room the wrong shade of blue because the paint sample looked different under the store lights. I told her about my failed first interview at a marketing firm and how I had worn mismatched socks because I was too nervous to notice. We finished dinner, cleaned up, and returned to the couch with another round of coffee. This time, she added a splash of cream and cinnamon to mine, remembering exactly how I liked it. Duke nestled at our feet as we continued talking about everything from music to travel dreams. Eventually, the conversation slowed, replaced by the gentle sound of the record playing in the background. Laura looked at me, her eyes reflecting the dim candlelight. "You know, I don't let many people stay this long," she said softly. "It's nice. I forgot how good it feels to just be around someone without rushing anything." "I'm glad I came over," I said, meaning it more than I expected. "You've always been kind, Tyler. Even as a kid. But now you're different. Wiser, maybe," she said with a small smile. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I just smiled back. I could feel the air between us shift again, not uncomfortably, but meaningfully. She reached over and gently touched my hand. "You remind me that connection doesn't have to be complicated." It was late by the time I got up to leave. Laura walked me to the door, Duke at her side. "Thanks for today," she said. "For the shelves, for dinner, for everything." "Anytime," I said, stepping onto the porch. I turned to her, and for a moment, we just stood there, neither of us wanting to end the night. She tilted her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "The guest room's made up. If you want to stay, you can." I looked at her, the woman I had known all my life but was now seeing in a completely new light, thoughtful, graceful, and quietly inviting me into something more than just a neighborly favor. "Okay," I said simply. She smiled, stepped aside, and I walked back in. That night, I lay in the guest room, unable to sleep. Not because I was uncomfortable, but because something had shifted. A boundary gently crossed, not out of impulse, but from a shared understanding. Nothing dramatic happened. No grand gestures. Just presence. Real, respectful, and meaningful presence. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and pancakes. Laura was already in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. She glanced at me and smiled. "Morning, sleepyhead." "Morning," I replied, rubbing my eyes. We had breakfast together, and this time, there was no lingering awkwardness. No pressure. Just two people sharing space, enjoying each other's company. I spent the rest of the weekend helping her around the house, fixing the leaky faucet, walking Duke, and even moving a few pots in her garden. She offered her thoughts on the career paths I was considering, told me about the city she once dreamed of moving to, and we laughed about things we used to find serious when we were younger.